We'll go for the roll call.
Commissioner Mum? Aye. Commissioner Pauly? Aye. Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Roth? Here. Mayor Neely?
Here. With that, I've had a request to have a citizen wanting to make some comment for something that's not on that agenda. Is the commission all right with that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Tommy, will come forward. Normally we don't. It's not a citizen comment thing on our study session, but go ahead.
Mayor and Commissioners, I'd like to address a situation that, quite frankly, I'm embarrassed about. Mayor Neely and Commissioner Pauly and Commissioner Roth were in attendance a week ago yesterday, at the Citizen Involvement Council meeting. The reason I was embarrassed was that a number of things took place during the course of that meeting that I find a very bad reflection on the Citizen Involvement Council and the way it is conducting its business. And to further add insult to injury, when the chair of the council attempted to work with city staff to schedule an emergency meeting, the chair was informed that he could not follow his responsibilities as outlined in the bylaws of the CIC. I just wanted to share a couple of sections from the CIC bylaws and ask that, since the CIC is really responsible for reporting to you and that you are the body that's responsible for the CIC, in order to fulfill your responsibilities to Title I of LCDC, that you ask city staff to allow the meeting to go forward, the emergency meeting that was scheduled or tried to be scheduled by the chair, so that we might resolve some of the problems that were going on at that Monday night meeting. In Section 4, Article 2, one of the requirements, the privileges and responsibilities of membership are to attend meetings and to speak from the floor on any issue being considered by the CIC. Section 5 of Article 2 stipulates any member or appointee designee who misses more than 2 unexcused consecutive regular meetings or misses a total of 5 regular meetings in 1 year is deemed to have vacated his or her position. During the process that occurred Monday a week ago, there were at least 3 individuals who were not eligible to participate that did participate. And in defense of them, the council itself did not follow its own bylaws in terms of setting up the election in a proper fashion. They are charged with the responsibility of putting together a nominating committee, and that nominating committee brings forth candidates. Candidates are welcome to be nominated from the floor as well. And the following meeting, the council is to vote and elect those individuals. That did not happen. So I'm simply asking you that, as a city commission, to fulfill your responsibilities to LCDC under Title I, which is the whole purpose for your having a CIC, that you instruct city staff to schedule the meeting as requested. Thank you.
I don't think this is a topic for a study session. I'll defer for a moment for David Frazier. Probably a thing we need to put on our agenda for this meeting.
Well, I would like to ask Mr. O'Brien, did you talk to any city staff tell you that you couldn't have a meeting?
The chair told me, he asked me to come tonight and
Okay.
express that opinion because he was unable to attend tonight's meeting.
That's very good, because I actually am one of the staff people that talked directly to Mr. O'Brien or to Mr. Guile, so I can tell you what we said.
Okay.
Instead of it sounds like you're kind of getting that secondhand, so I'm going to give the first-hand account had a conversation with Mr. Guile because he wanted to hold a meeting to sort of, I think, have another election and consider how to do this in accordance with the bylaws. None of our staff told him they couldn't have a meeting. What I said was, I think it would be prudent for you to wait until you get legal advice from the city attorney before you do that, so that you call the meeting according to your bylaws, that you rely upon the advice of the city attorney, or at least get it and hear what it is. So no city staff said you can't have a meeting. We just wanted to have enough time. Mr. Guile was, I think, under the impression that this was something we had to decide that day, and my assistant was not here that day, and Nancy was out of the state. So when Nancy returned, Nancy started talking to the city attorney, and they got back with Mr. Guile and with some advice. And so I think there's really some confusion. One is, can we have a meeting? The second one is, which they certainly can have a meeting, and staff in no way wants to obstruct that. But can they have an election do-over? And that's what we wanted legal advice on, because we just simply weren't sure, and we don't want to be in the role of the city attorney, I think, any more than the citizens do.
And what was,
This is up to the commission. My preference, if the city attorney wants to make a comment, I guess I would prefer this be wait for a regular commission meeting, because if it entails us making decisions, does it entail us making decisions?
You certainly can, but you don't have to.
I don't think we can. We're in a work session.
So it would be
Yeah.
something I'd rather schedule on as an agenda at the next city commission meeting.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I had this on my
If you have some
reports.
comments to make, that's fine, but
Yeah.
I prefer not to make a decision.
Plus, it
as a
hasn't been
commission.
noticed, so other
Yeah,
members
yeah,
don't
right.
know to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to at least know
Right.
Yeah, let me give you
attorney said
what you know. Obviously, there are a lot of things that happened in the meeting. I wasn't there, don't know exactly what happened, but generally, what I discussed with the city staff and have also communicated to Mr. Guile, as well as at least one other person, is that do-overs of elections are extremely rare and an extraordinary remedy. You think back to whether it's Bush v. Gore or some of the other hotly contested elections. I've never heard say we're going to do a do-over. It just doesn't happen unless there's something that really strikes at the fundamental nature of the election that says it wasn't fair. Procedural issues like the nominating committee wasn't formed, and those aren't the types of things that typically lead to a new election. And that was my advice to city staff, is that whether mistakes were made or not, once the election has been held and the results have been declared, typically that's it.
Rarely do you have someone that was elected that wants a revote. I mean, we had new people that were elected who also had a problem with this. So I think that's extraordinary as well.
And certainly anybody who was elected can step down.
Yeah.
And
No, I
then-
don't think that's the issue. They're just concerned about the process and being part of an organization that doesn't follow its own bylaws. And I think that is a concern.
We ran into this trouble with one of the neighborhood associations.
Yeah.
I think it's
And
a
it's
huge
the
concern. I don't
same
mind
people.
talking about it at our next meeting, but I don't know if it's too late at that point. But
Can I
Right.
speak? Or David's next?
No, I've already had my share.
Okay. There's a couple things, I was at that meeting, and a couple things that I noticed that were, some of it was, I would say, bordering on fraud. And not to, put down what you're saying, Mr. Kvasman, but thanks to the world of computers, I've been doing a lot of research on this the last few days, and I'm not employed, so that's what I do. And have found in many instances in cities, nothing national, but in cities, Murfreesboro, South Carolina, all those places have had do-overs
Okay.
in city committees and councils, just for reasons of this sort. So it's not something that we're out there setting the bar on. And also, they do report to us. So I think it is up to our purview to take care of this and make sure that the election was handled in the proper way.
Mr. Mumm.
Well, thanks, Tom, for bringing this up again tonight. I do want to put this on a regular city meeting so everybody gets noticed and can be here. The purpose of the CIC is not just to fulfill the goal. It's because I was part of the initial group to bring the CIC back together. It was to bring neighborhoods back together and get them reactivated. It wasn't just to check mark the goal for the land use issue. So it's dual purpose. And, you know, there are bylaws issues everywhere, not just within our city. And if you want to do a do-over, do a do-over. I mean, but I don't see that we need to say, do it. I mean, you're free to do that.
Mr. Roth?
Well, another reason for doing this soon is we were told that we may have the option of not having our next commission meeting. So we won't have a meeting in December to make this decision. And those officers for the CIC change places January 1st. So if we're going to have a re-election, we need to know who's going to be taking over the spots.
I don't feel that's our call, personally.
Well, whether it's our call or not, we cannot make a decision here. If somebody wants to put a motion to have a regular commission meeting on the eve before Christmas Eve day, then you may do so. But there's nothing noticed. We can't entertain. From my standpoint, we can't entertain any motions here to take actions at a study session when this hasn't been noticed. So if somebody wants to put forward a motion to actually meet here on Wednesday before Thanksgiving Eve day, then we can do that.
It's
Christmas.
It's the 19th. That's not before Christmas. I mean, it's before Christmas, but not.
Before Christmas Eve.
But it's the 19th.
No.
No, it's 19th. Well, then that probably isn't a problem. So if somebody wants to put a motion forward to do that, then you may.
We can't have a motion at this meeting.
Can't.
Not at this
Oh, that's right. We can't have a motion. Well, we surely can make a decision as to whether we have our next commission meeting.
Yep, that was under my reports. Nancy was going to talk about it.
Yes.
We don't have any other agenda items.
Yep.
But this could be.
I think we've gone all the way around.
Commissioner Pauley?
Yeah, I have a quick question. The CIC is currently working on revamping their bylaws, correct? There's a committee set up, a subcommittee?
There is not. The CIC was asked to put together a new template that the neighborhoods could use. They did their job. They turned it over to the city to look at and pass on to the city attorney for approval, and that seems to have, let us say that it has never come back to us. We keep hearing that it will come back, but it has not come back, and even that is in a advisory format only. The neighborhoods are not required to do it, but the subcommittee for the CIC that sat down and studied the issue was primarily as a result of a lot of conflict in one of the neighborhoods specifically. I happen to have served along with others on that review committee. We looked at each and every set of bylaws that currently exist in each neighborhood and chose the best portions, or what we felt were the best portions, of all of those bylaws, formed them into one set of bylaws as a template that could be used by any or anyone who wished to in terms of neighborhoods, because we felt they included many good things. I believe that the CIC bylaws themselves need an awful lot of work and should be worked on as part of the process this coming year. It's a totally different set. It's a set that the CIC answers to the City Commission. The neighborhood associations are independent of that.
Thank you.
I think it's not okay for the city commission to say, figure it out, because clearly they can't. And this is the same, along the same lines as the problem that was happening in Park Place. And at one point in time, we as a commission had to say, this is what has to happen to make this work. There's still problems going on. If we just say, oh, well, CIC, have another election if you feel like it, that's really great direction for a city commission who's supposed to be following the rules. I think we need to look at it. I think we need to give them direct, with conversation at a regular meeting with our attorney, and be able to give the CIC directions on what we expect them to do. And it should be following the bylaws. And if it doesn't, we need to fix that. I don't think these problems are going to go away if we keep saying, oh, well, whatever, figure it out and come back another month when you do another, event, or have next year when you have another election. That's not okay. And just because it happens elsewhere, this is just unbelievable. So I say I would prefer that we have a regular meeting, and if that means it's on the 19th, then it should be on the 19th.
I'll just poll.
Yes.
Commissioner Earl? Commissioner Smith?
No, I think so.
Commissioner Mum?
I'm okay with that.
Yes.
Okay, we'll have our meeting on the 19th.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, with that, we'll go on to our regular business. The proposed Oregon Municipal Code Amendment to add an option for a hearings officer to process appeals of land use decisions.
Excuse me, Mayor, did you want to do item number 2, future agenda items? Were there any other items?
We just did one.
Yes.
Are there any other future agenda items? Hearing none, we'll go on then to 3A. I'll get the staff report, Tony.
Thank you, Mayor. What the Planning Division has proposed and brought forward tonight for a work session was a discussion about some administrative changes to Chapter 1750 of the Oregon Municipal Code, which regulates how we process land use applications, all the way from pre-apps and neighborhood association meetings through appeals and notice of decisions. So this sets out our standards. These are not design criteria or requirements for development. This is how we process applications. And I think I'll start with the two easier ones, which are dealing with complying with Oregon revised statutes as it relates to who would have standing to appeal a Type 2 or a staff decision. We're proposing to update our code so that it is consistent with the ORS 227-175-10AC. Confers standing on anyone who is, quote, adversely affected or aggrieved, unquote, by the decision or is entitled of notice of the decision, which would include those individuals who submitted written comments. So traditionally, what our code says is that you have to have participated in writing in order to have standing to appeal. What this amendment would do would say not only those person who participated in writing, but also those person who can demonstrate that they were adversely affected or aggrieved by the decision would have the right to appeal a Type 2 staff decision up to whatever hearing body is decided where it should go. Right now, it's the City Commission. The second change would be to compliance with ORS 227-175-10AD, which requires that appeals of a decision by the Community Development Director be heard de novo. Right now, so de novo essentially means we would hold a new hearing. Right now, we hold an on-the-record appeal, which means no new evidence. Arguments could be made. This change, to be consistent with ORS, would allow essentially a new hearing, new evidence, new testimony to be provided. Any questions on those two proposed text amendments?
I do. I just want to make sure. Does this preclude appeals to the City Commission?
I was going to get to that one next.
Okay.
Okay. So any questions on a de novo hearing and who has standing? Okay, great. The next code amendment that we're proposing to bring forward for discussion tonight is dealing with how appeals are heard. So what we've proposed is adding another tool that the City Commission, at their discretion, could decide to use, and that would be the use of a hearings officer. Hearings officer would be an on-call or a contract attorney that we would set up, and this would be something where if an appeal was made,
if there was an instance of any conflict of interest or inability of the commission because of if there were property negotiations or the city was an applicant and the commission felt that it was appropriate to give it to a hearings officer, they would have the sole discretion. The applicant would not. The applicant could not request it. It would be at the city commission's sole discretion to allow a city hearings officer to hear it. Without a decision by the city commission to give it to the hearings officer, all appeals would continue to come to the city commission. And as I said, there are some efficiencies associated with this. Meeting every other Wednesday, we have run into some issues, although it's been relatively slow lately. But back 5, 6, 7 years, on the 120-day decision, we have to issue a decision within 120 days. We were running into some calendar issues there. That does allow a little bit of flexibility there because the hearings officer can schedule those hearings whenever they want, rather than calling a special meeting if they needed to. And I'm not inferring, and I really am bringing this forward as a tool, an opportunity that this commission could use. We would hate to be in a situation where, not that I don't believe anybody on our historic review board, our planning commission, or our city commission, when we talk about bias, conflict of interest, and the ability to make a decision based on the code, I believe everyone can do it, and I believe they always have. But perception is a big part of this as well. And if you get into, especially if it's a public-private partnership, let's say like the Cove, where urban renewal, of which you are all members, have made a decision already, and an appeal comes up on a land use application on the exact same items, of which you may or may not have supported already verbally, even though I believe you can make a decision based on the code, there's still the perception. And if the commission felt that it was appropriate to utilize this tool, they could. If they felt that we can make this decision, they don't have to. So we're bringing this forward more as a tool, just in case we ever need it. We hate to be in a situation where we look back and say, I wish we had this opportunity or this option. So that's kind of what we're proposing in this legislative amendment. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Commissioner Munn.
Don't we have that option right now to defer?
We do not.
It's not anywhere in our code or charter.
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm up next. The process would be, we would get an appeal, and then we make the decision at the time of the appeal whether we want to take the appeal ourselves or direct it to the
Hearings officer.
hearings officer.
There would be two options there. One would be an appeal. An application could be submitted, and before the notice of decision is, the commission could decide that if there is an appeal of this file, we want it to go to a hearings officer. Or if an appeal is made, you could decide to send it to a hearings officer at that point. So you'd have, appeal doesn't necessarily need to be submitted in order for this commission to make a decision that they wanted a hearings officer to hear it. So you have some flexibility there on when you make that decision.
I'd have a hard time knowing whether or not we would want to put it to the hearings officer unless we saw what was before us.
Well, I guess an example would be the city is an applicant.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
and we
okay,
just make
yeah.
this commission decides that if this is appealed, we want it to go to a hearings officer.
Okay.
Just as an example.
I can see that. Commissioner Smith?
So I'm not opposed to the way it's worded, because I think, if we were sending everything to a hearings officer, that'd be a concern to me. I guess I would ask the question on the even our choice as to which ones we see and don't see has an element of perception and bias as well, because it benefits us in its own way if we hear the things that benefit us
Yes.
and not the things that don't. And so I don't think that solves the problem. I think it could be looked at by the public in a way that, the city has no interest in the outcome of that, so they're just going to send it to someone else to decide and only hear the ones that they have a vested interest in. I think that's just as much of an argument and perception issue as the way it is now. So that really bothers me. So I guess I'd be interested in any response to that. But I think that's it for now. I think it could be looked at either
I guess
way.
we're trying to write it so that you have the ability to utilize this as a tool, not as a way to pick and choose. I mean, I guess in the 10, 11 years that I've been here, the commission has wanted to be a part of these decisions because they want to understand what the
Right.
issues are and what the public's
Well, not-
concerns are. So I don't
Right.
see this as being something that
Right.
I think the commission would take it very seriously. Now, I can't
Right.
speak for future commissioners, and
Well-
I do understand your concern about the perception. Whether you do it or you don't, there's always going to be a perception.
Right. And I would say that because of the amount of meetings that we go to and the amount of citizens who think that as a city commission we know everything that's happening in Oregon City, I have people coming to me, almost daily. Well, is this business coming into Oregon City or is this property? I don't know. I mean, because, really, we assume that the planning commission is doing their job and everything is going through its process. And the times that it doesn't is when we get to see it, and that's when we know there's a problem, and that's what we get to address because that's why we were elected. So I don't want to see us. This. I understand the way it's worded now, and that makes me a little bit more comfortable than just saying everything we're going to send off to someone else, and we aren't a piece of that decision-making process. But I just think it doesn't resolve the real. If the real concern is the perception and the bias, this doesn't fix it.
The real concern is a conflict of interest. If there's a legitimate conflict of interest, and that can be challenged, this is a tool that you could use.
That would be a conflict of interest to the whole, just clarification, to the whole commission, because we all declare individually conflicts of interest, and that's our responsibility.
It is. It is.
So it's really an issue of whether the commission, it's a conflict of interest for the city, in a sense, or this commission
I think
as a whole.
You're acting as the judicial body in this.
Yes.
And I keep going back to, let's just say, the city commission, approved the budget for a new facility and was part of the site selection, was part of the design of it, and it got appealed. If even though we sit up here, and I believe that you would say I have no conflict of interest and that you could make a fair decision, whoever brought the appeal is going to feel that they're not, that's the perception that we're just trying to provide this tool for. If the commission's not
Or
interested,
we shouldn't put ourselves in that position. Period.
it's hard though. It is hard.
I mean, we shouldn't be making those kind
Commissioner
of deals.
Pauly.
Yes, I'm just trying to put this into context. Has this come up before? Is there a need for this? Has this situation come up before? That we would need
It's
this?
come up in general discussions. I don't think it's ever been specifically proposed.
I don't think. Yeah, I think.
But I
it's
mean,
the
has
same.
there been a situation that's come up where we would have needed this, was my question.
I can't recall a specific time that in Oregon City we had an appeal where there's an allegation that the city had an interest in it. I can tell you it has come up in a number of other cities. And in those cases, what Lube and the Court of Appeals have said is the governing body can hear those, largely because nobody else can. It's again, getting back to what Tony said, it's really a perception, a tool that you can use if you want to, for whatever reason, decide this one's too hot, we don't want to have to fight this battle that we did it, we're going to push it over here, or not even too hot, but we just want to make sure that we're cleaner than Caesar's wife. And sorry. Also, high school Latin came back to me.
Wow.
And I guess I would go back to is it's more, like I said, I'm really emphasizing that this is a tool for you to utilize. And with the ballot title, the politics aside of the ballot title, we didn't have an ordinance that even if the commission decided they wanted to include something, that they would have that option. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm just saying, having it there and not using it is better than needing it and not having it.
Okay.
Commissioner Moe.
Having extra tools is good. I don't think that this commission would ever not hear something unless it is a direct conflict for the whole commission. But So I'm good with having a tool. The wording we'll have to work on, specific to if the city is in conflict, maybe, or something to that. I don't know.
And I would just caution that why we wrote it the way we did is that we didn't want the city's decision to send it to a hearings officer to become an appealable decision.
Right.
If you start setting parameters that you have to make findings for, like, the city has a conflict of interest, then all of a sudden that becomes a decision that could potentially be appealed.
Right.
So we want you to have that latitude to, at your discretion, make that decision.
Right. And then I have to go back to, in 20 years, probably nobody in this room will be in these chairs, I'm assuming. And so what is what is the outcome of today's decision for the commission 20 years from now? Is this going to be a good tool that they're going to want, or is this something they're going to just say everything goes there to the hearings officer and it doesn't come before us? So that's kind of a concern I have too, is because I do think that's part of our job, is to hear the public.
Commissioner Roth.
Well, exactly. I don't like putting another layer between the citizens and the commission. And I believe that that's why we're elected, is to hear those things. And I would be very reticent to have a future commission just refer everything to a hearings officer. So what I would like to see in big bold letters is all appeals will come to the commission first. But I know you probably don't want to head it that way. My second problem is
Probably not.
budgetary impact. We don't have a budget that's out there, and so say we get 6 appeals in 1 year. How are we going to pay for this?
Yeah.
Our current planning fee schedule requires that the applicant of the appeal pay. We have the ability to go back and collect the appeal fee plus the fees associated with it. We would amend it to include the hearings officer should the commission so decide to send it to the hearings officer. There would be a budgetary impact if a neighborhood association duly noticed and voted on did bring the appeal, as theirs are waived, and the city subsidizes those appeals, so that there would be a budgetary impact.
That would be a big concern.
Clackamas County hearings officer, which would probably which does hear more appeals than we would hear, has a contract for $40,000, of which he has never gone above in the years that he has been acting as Clackamas County's hearings officer. You're looking at roughly $150 to $200 an hour. We could certainly provide more detailed information on that. So yes, there would be some impact depending on who brought the appeal.
Okay. Thank you.
I got myself down now. I would agree with Commissioner Roth. If we do this, my preference would be that everything still gets appealed to the commission, and then the commission can make the decision at that time, as opposed to doing something ahead of the process, being accused of trying to avoid an issue, a controversial issues. I don't think it's a good position for the commission to be in. And I think rather than having that capability ahead of time, I'd rather see the commission make the decision as to whether it wants to do it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would be my preference on how it would be written.
And just so I'm clear,
You were suggesting
I-
situations where we wouldn't hear the appeal at all, go directly, and I think I'm in agreement with, in fact, I know I'm in agreement with Commissioner Roth that that's not the way I'd want to see it written. It'd be an appeal to us, and then we could make the decision of whether to send it
To
to a
hear it or
hearings
not.
office.
but we would bring, for example, Tony Conkle versus Black Development, and that would be the extent of it.
Right.
Is that what you're talking? You'd want to know what the appeal is, rather than bringing
Some things,
a first evidentiary hearing and then deciding at the hearing
Yes.
that you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
That you would want just the
Whether it was a staff decision that gets appealed, or whether it's a planning commission decision that gets appealed to us, I would want the commission to hear the appeal before we would make a decision whether to send it to a hearings officer.
Let me just try and explain what I'm hearing. When you say you want to hear the appeal, is that you want to be informed that an appeal has been filed?
Yeah, the appeal has been filed, but we have to know something about that appeal before we can make a decision whether to send it to the hearings officer.
Okay.
Right.
I don't see how else you could do it. I mean,
So
there's another way you could do it.
It would be informational rather than a public hearing.
Yes.
Well, I wouldn't want to see them ever go on a consent agenda.
No.
I don't
It would
think
be
we're proposing that.
informational.
It would be informational.
But it would be informational to the point that we can ask as many questions as we want to make our decision as to whether to forward it to an appeals officer.
Is this?
And
I
I
think
just
that
had,
opens the door itself to.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
there's-
We're going to get some advice here.
I mean, and as far as that goes, I think that, the questions that the commission may ask, you can have that decision as part of the record in the appeal that eventually goes to the hearings officer, and it may, I'm not as worried about that as much as what I think I hear you say is, we want to know what the issues are. We want to know what's at stake here before we do that, before we make any decision. So in terms of sending appeals to the hearings officer during the process, you're not interested in that piece.
That's right.
The other part of wanting to know the issues is that if it's a type 2 decision, state law, the other piece that we had, says they get a de novo hearing, which means that they don't have to tell anybody what the hearing issues are. So you may not know what the issues are. It may just be, we appeal, and that's it. And so, that's that. There may not be that information, but there may be. It really depends on what the appellant wants to include.
It's tough.
But if it's a decision from the planning commission, they will have to tell you what the issues are.
Right, and so when it would be a de novo, when does it come out what the issue is?
At the first initial hearing before you or before the hearings officer.
Okay, so then I would want to hear it.
Okay.
I don't.
Have a button now.
Well, before you do that, and then you're going to ask, I'm a little bit confused.
Uh-huh.
The de novo situation would occur under what conditions? I mean, there were two things being brought before us, weren't there?
Right.
Okay. And now I think you're going to the first thing was brought before us. Is that not correct?
It is, but even if it wasn't brought before you, state law says that if it's a type 2 decision, you got to have a de novo hearing. So, in that situation, de novo means a new on the record. I mean, a new
Right.
hearing, not on the record. You get to raise any issues, bring in any evidence. And so, I'm sorry, that's type 2.
What is it?
They're subdivisions and site plan design reviews. Those decisions would be de novo, and in those situations, people can say I appeal and here's my concerns, or they can just say I appeal. So in those situations, you may or may not know what the issues are. For Planning Commission, HRB, those other ones where there are previous hearings, then they would have to give you specific, here are the issues I'm going to raise, and they'll be limited to those issues.
Your alarm?
I would feel a lot better if
Everything
it
is
wasn't
okay.
something that didn't sound like we ought to die for coverage.
What's up with that?
Okay, hit the panic button.
So
Is that clear? Or?
Clear as mud. It's clear as mud.
To some degree, it's clear, but so we would not know what the de novo.
You wouldn't know what. You could take some guesses. You'd have the record, the comments that are made to the hearings officer, but somebody may play games and not really
You'd have a staff
give the
report.
real issues.
Yeah.
You would have a staff report, absolutely.
Okay, we'd have a staff report. So we'd have something to operate off.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, but also then having a discussion about that and whether we should hear it or not, I think opens it to the bias issue too. Why did they send that? Oh, well, anyone in the audience can say, well, they must not have, that just seems.
If you send it to the hearings officer, your bias is immaterial because the final decision is made by the hearings officer. If you decide to keep it,
When is this coming to us?
It may not come at all if you don't want. If you don't want.
Well,
Mayor,
I
I'm
mean-
on the on the.
I think we'd
Yeah,
like to
yeah.
discuss it more. I don't know if we have all the.
David Frazier's going to enlighten us completely.
I don't know
Okay,
about that. But I just want to give some perspective on this. It's hard to actually fathom this right now because the number of development permit applications and review we're doing.
Yeah.
We see a lot of our planning commission meetings canceled. I think it's picking up a little bit, but it's not. It was really common in the last 10 years for cities in Oregon all across the state to use hearings officers, and I mean almost exclusively because in fact, one of the cities I worked in, the whole agenda, just about every time, was
Yeah.
land use issues, and the council simply couldn't get any other business done. It's almost hard to fathom that right now in the current economic situation.
I guess the question I would have is this: Have we really been broken in the past? I mean, I've served on this commission for, well, it started 16 years ago, although there was a 2-year break in it. And the point is, I mean, things got appealed out of the commission to LUBA on occasions, and I don't know, the city commission is, and sometimes we lost it, but I don't think we've ever made many serious mistakes in the process that we have we?
I don't believe so, no.
Oh, so.
I mean, Mayor, the other point I was going to make is somewhat.
The need for it.
The other point I was going to make is similar to that, in that if, and I think Mr. Conkle hit on this a minute ago, if the commission is going to be in a position where you're essentially having a hearing or creating a record, if you will, anyway, before you know if you're comfortable, then I think any efficiency that would be gained for either the public or the commission or the city in general is just not there. So I would think if you're not comfortable in concept, it's not something you would want to do.
No, I don't think so either.
You know, it's worthwhile discussion, but I just wouldn't
Yep.
probably do it in this situation.
See, that's why we have study sessions.
We studied, really worked hard that way.
So it sounds like nobody's really interested in pursuing this. Am I correct? All right.
So we will just move forward with the 2 corrections to be consistent with ORS.
That'd be great.
Great.
Thank you.
With that, we shift over to John Lewis on water rates and city charter amendment.
Tom wants to talk again.
Does the commission want to intervene? Come on up.
Again, this time I represent the Hazel Grove Westing Farms Neighborhood Association. And while we submitted a response on the particular issue that you just considered, I'm not sure it got in the packets because we were guilty of sending it in late. However, in reviewing what's going on, one of the concerns that I have with even the current process, and I know there's been some discussion about taking a look at your own ordinances and cleaning them up a bit. In the document that was sent to you as part of the packet, page numbers are backwards, but it says page 5 of 2, if you're able to find that. Under City Code 17.50.090 public notices, in Section A, subsection 7, it states that the notice shall
Can I
state.
interrupt you a minute and ask
Yeah.
what attachment would we be
What-
referring to on this one?
This is on the appeals process.
It would be the redlined version of the code. Sorry, let me bring up
The
your-
ordinance,
Let me
No.
bring up your agenda.
Oh, hold on, I have to go back.
Started
to
out
the-
with the
We want to get it in front of us here.
yeah. Work session, staff report, is that what you're referring
It's in the
to?
staff report, as I recall, and you
Because
have
there's
2
two
pages.
staff
They're numbered
reports.
page 1 of 2 and 2 of 2, and then it starts over again and starts with 1 of 2, 2 of 2, on down through 11 of 2. So it's a reasonably large file.
Okay.
Well, then it's not that one, I don't.
Well,
Looks like
that-
it's the second one.
It's the
It's
second
the
one.
last one on the page.
Okay. Well, that looks like
That
the
one's
same.
short. No, that
That
can't
one
be
only
that.
has 4 pages.
So
Yeah.
hold it up so we can see, is it redlined or?
Oh, I just,
The blue line.
That's the page that I printed out.
The
that was-
ordinance.
How about work session draft report?
17 for the. Oh, thank you.
See, I'm good.
You are good, man.
Which one?
Which one is it?
I don't know. No, it's just have her do it.
Which one is it, Kathy?
It's the ordinance. It's the ordinance.
It's the ordinance, the first,
Okay.
the first ordinance?
12,
bottom.
1 ordinance.
The bottom, the
Bottom.
last one.
Thank you.
Okay.
If you scroll down to page 5 of 2, which is actually
Okay,
we
page
go.
7.
got it.
Eight of the-
Okay,
okay.
now we got it. Thank you.
How does 5?
I'm looking at yours, I can't even scroll. It just
Near the
You
top,
can't really see it on here either. I'll go bigger.
near the top, it says public notices.
Yes, got it.
If
Now we
you see below that, Section A, Notice of Type 2 applications, when it gets into the appeal process, down under subsection 7, the notice shall state that the city recognized neighborhood association requesting an appeal fee waiver pursuant to Section 1750.290C must officially approve the request through a vote of its general membership or board at a duly announced meeting prior to filing of an appeal. If you think about the scheduling of neighborhood association meetings, at best, they're usually once a quarter. And that exception, in many cases, is going to prohibit a neighborhood association from appealing. That is particularly disconcerting to Hazel Grove Wessing Farms as we're moving forward with the South End Concept Plan, because we expect that there will be a lot of development, not only in the immediate future, but in the long-term future of our neighborhood. And so we are extremely concerned even about the ordinance as it stands today, and I would ask that if you do review your ordinance, that you perhaps change the wording on that to allow neighborhood association to make an appeal.
But who's
without-
going to make it?
Without having to go through
I can't agree with
gymnastics.
that at all. If you're not going to have a decision made by the board or by a general membership, I don't know who's going to come and speak. Who has standing to do so?
Okay.
It has to be through your board. You can carry. You always have a.
It can be through the
special-
board, yes.
It can be.
But
Well, isn't that what it says?
It says board or general
Yeah.
membership.
So,
Yeah.
so I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want an individual,
We'll
just
call
a
a
land
special
use
board
chair or
meeting.
something coming before
You
us.
can call a special board meeting.
has to
You
be.
could
We'll call
do a-
special board meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Special board
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
But if you shrink the time by going to a hearings officer, that limits the
Well,
ability to
we
even call a
already-
special
we
We're
meeting.
not
already
even going to
did
hear
away
about
with
that.
that.
Yes. So, yeah, I
We already
understand what
did-
you're saying there. You
That's a
bet.
non-issue. Yeah,
Okay.
there you go.
John?
We got a presentation. Water rates, woo!
Water rates.
Can I talk to you about my water bill?
Sure can.
After the meeting, Kathy.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for hearing us out yet again. Part of this is because the last work session we had, we heard from you and heard some requests for more information. So part of it's providing you with more information. Part of it's also just getting another opportunity to tell the listening public about this particular issue, because it's an important issue. So let's see if I can get that too. So some of this is very repetitive, so I apologize for that. I know that you know much of this, but we're going to go through it again anyway. So
Doesn't really matter.
whether you like it or not.
So sit down, here we go.
You sound like a parent.
Sorry, I didn't. I've been with the mayor all day. Man, I'm getting
Maybe you want to appeals for
No, my day was very pleasant with the mayor today. So,
He had to cover himself on that one, didn't he?
so prior to 1996, we didn't have the issue that we have before you today. You were able to make set water rates, or the city commission was able to set water rates at as it saw fit. In 1996, we had a charter amendment that required the city to roll water rates back to 1994 levels, and it also included a maximum amount of rate increase that the city could see on an annual basis. And because of that, the court decided, or the court looked at that decision and says, wait a minute, you can't do that because we've already issued bond debt, and so you've got to keep those rates to pay that bond debt down. And so They didn't allow the rollback, but said that it could happen in 20 years when that debt was paid off, and so in October 2014 that'll be paid off. And at this point, we've got this concern about water rate rollbacks. So we're going to show you some things that you haven't seen before, although in the same format that you've seen before. So we're going to show you the 5%. We've talked about this enough to where we're pretty clear that your direction has been the no rollback option is not a good option, and we need to look at something different than that. And we need to look at some kind of form of a rate increase. And we've been leaning towards something between 5 and 8%. I think staff has been recommending something closer to 8%, and we recognize that there's pressures that might suggest we should look at something less. We're also going to show you a measure that would adopt an ordinance limiting rate increases and repeal the current charter language. So that's something a little bit new that you haven't seen. So 5% annual rate increase, no rollback. Rates would essentially go up $1.79 a month on average over we're looking at like a 5-year period, which we'll show you in the next couple of slides. But you've seen this slide before. Again, for the listening public, we're showing the different colors: treatment of drinking water, operational services, debt service, master plan pipeline replacement projects, the public works building complex, and then it doesn't show up on this slide, but in future slides it'll show up as deferred capital in an orange, and then the revenue that we actually would see based on a 5% increase is shown in the red line. So same scenario. You've asked for longer term, so we're showing you 20 years worth of rates and rate increases and how that would look based on assumptions. I guess what I keep falling back on, and I think Melita and I both are in agreement here. We've talked about this $2.3 million worth of capital, and we feel like that's still where we want to go. I don't want to pile on any more on top of that, but this doesn't assume problems with our current reservoirs, problems with our current pump stations. There's other things out there that if they're covered by our operations budget, they're shown here and they're covered. If there were a major expenditure that we needed to take on to deal with some of those, pump stations, for instance, they typically don't have a 20-year life. So but we're proposing we still cover that under the $2.3 million to the extent we can. So at the 5% scenario, we cover our operational expenses, and we cover some capital, but we don't cover all the capital. And we leave at the end of that 20-year period, we have a deferred capital liability at $12.8 million. And this slide shows the various, for the first 5 years, 6 years, I guess. 6 years we're showing there. In year 2016, there's that $1.79 at the bottom, in the bottom row, which would be and I'll refer to that same year and same monthly amount in each of the next scenarios. So just so you know where that's at as well. So we're going to go through the 6% scenario, which again showing an average monthly rate of increase of $2.19. This is the 10-year, which shows a slight difference, but not much. But when you look at it over a 20-year scenario, we're showing something that gets us to zero deferred maintenance at the end of the 20 years. So Alita and I talked about this a little bit, that 3%, if you see at the year 2028, we go into we're suggesting maybe we'd be ready for a 3% rate, then a 2.5%, and essentially end up on a 0%. Now that's very theoretical, and it assumes a lot of things go right and not many things go wrong. But it's trying to show you that 6% gets us out there to about 13 years, I believe, and then and we'll be paying back some of that deferred capital that we had during the first few years, and then we'll see that decrease over time, and as with the rate increases. And we get to a 20-year deferred capital liability of 0, which we think is a good goal to have. Again, showing you the annual rate increases in percentages and in dollar amounts. We're going to show you the 7%. You getting the picture? This is
We could be
a little
really good.
repetitive, but as I was going through, I was feeling a little repetitive. But these are all good. These are all good scenarios, and I think they all show that we're trying to look at a solution that you will find acceptable as well. So here's 7% scenario. After about 9 years of 7% rate increases, we see the opportunity to, again, if all goes well, curtail those rate increases to something below 7%. Again, we can get to 0 deferred capital at the end of 20 years. Year 2016, a $2.60 monthly rate increase. And then you've seen this 8% rate increase as well. We see that curtailing sooner, 8 years, I believe, and then we could definitely see a 3% rate increase from that point forward that we think would be appropriate. 20-year deferred capital liability is 0. 2016 monthly rate change of $3.03. And those are residential rates. I guess I haven't mentioned that, so I should kind of confirm that as well. These are all based on residential rates. So,
May I ask a question real quickly? Someone had suggested to me that we use an index and then put like 3% on top of the index or 5% on top of the index. And, you know, who knows what that index is going to be, what we choose to do. But that kind of seemed like a good idea to me, rather than just saying 8% out there. We may end up at 8%, but we can also kind of tie it into the budget and inflation. And
you pointed out a great point, and I'm glad you made it, because we've been, I think, clear on this. We're saying 8% max or 7% max.
Mm-hmm.
It would make sense to index that based, and a lot of it's going to be based on need in the first few years of that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to, I don't see us deviating from the maximum, but as years move out, indexing makes a lot more sense,
Mm-hmm.
I believe. But you know, our charter right now lists 3%. If we stick with charter language that has a numeric number in it for a maximum, then you know, what we're going to show is the maximum, but what we show when we start catching up is something rate increase more based on an index than a specific number, something tied to the CPI or typically in engineering projects or civil projects, they use the Engineering News Record Index as a way to increase those rates. So.
I probably heard from the same person, because that same person talked to probably every one of us, but they did indicate they talked to you before they talked to me. So, talking about an index, maybe a cost of living index, and the commission within limits would be able to specify a percentage above it.
Mm-hmm.
It works when you don't have a long list of deferred maintenance like we have right now. So, you know, I mean, if you made the argument that we need to tie it to an index and we need to follow that index today, well, the index isn't going to match our need. So we got to get caught up and see some of that deferred maintenance.
And that was the suggestion. The index and
something
the
else.
commission would have above the index the authority to have an additional amount up to some kind of cap.
I see. Yeah.
So maybe it's the index plus 2%.
or the index plus 5.
3%. Well, yeah, I don't know if people would be comfortable with that one.
Mayor
Possibly, yeah.
and Commissioner Roth, I did want to chime in on the idea of indexing. What that would do essentially is delegate to some other body that you have no control over the rate of taxes, and that delegation of that to something that isn't you presents a real constitutional problem. There's a non-delegation provision in our Constitution, and it's come up in a few cases, but
And so it's a no-no?
I think
Hearings
it's a
officer,
no-no.
Bill?
Okay.
Hearings
Yeah.
officer?
Hearings officer, okay. Delegate it to a hearings officer.
It's too easy.
That would have been a nice fix, though.
It would have been, but think about it. If you delegate it to somebody who creates the CPI, and that gets taken over by some political body of some sort, and all of a sudden you've got your charter
That's
tied
true.
to somebody who you don't know what they're going to do.
That's true.
I guess, from my standpoint, I'd like one that would take us to a point where we feel we probably took care of a deferred maintenance. You go through higher rates, and that'll finish earlier. However, we're pulling ourselves out of a recession. People don't know if we're going to go into a double dip or not. When you get to 7 and 8%, I become very, very uncomfortable because currently is the issue, and we are in recession. And having a real high at the beginning and a promise of a lower one, when in fact at this point a lot of our citizens are in trouble.
Maybe I can go through, unless, David,
Yeah.
did you want to say
Well, I
something?
just wanted to mention that, I don't know, Mayor, if you recall the letter you wrote that you asked me to take to the county commission when they voted on their sewer rates a couple of years ago. The very warm reception I got indeed.
I could be there.
But I think that year is a little over 8%, and I'm
So
on
sewer rates.
I'm on the and I'm on the advisory committee for that organization still, and their rates schedule. John's been going with me to those meetings as well, and I'm pretty sure their rates are going to be higher than
Well, I
what
know.
we're contemplating. And then we see our neighbors across the river that were at, I think, with a 5% cap for many years, and now they're putting. I think they're going to put on the ballot at 18% jump,
18%.
which is really
Wow.
pretty remarkable
Yeah,
in
yeah,
one
well,
in one fell
well-
swoop. I'm not saying that any of that is stuff we should do, but I think it's indicative that other elected bodies are grappling with the
A
same
couple of things.
problems.
The case for the county is they're building new facilities. We're not talking about building new facilities. We're talking about maintenance issues. So that's different. In that
Very
sense.
different. Yeah.
The other thing is that West Lynn has, I think, it was at a lower rate to begin with. So they're struggling because they started at a lower rate than we did. And so I don't think either of those are comparable because they're different issues.
Well, I was really just putting them out there because not because they're analogous to your situation, but because they indicate that other elected bodies are struggling with this and how to fund it. And there is
I understand.
as many as the approaches that you see people taking. That's how many different solutions
I
there
just
are.
I just wanted to indicate that us doing 8% doesn't necessarily make us look like the good guys compared to West Lynn if they have a higher percent, or the county if it has a higher percent. I think they're dealing with different issues, and so I don't want to make those comparisons. I understand there's uncertainties, but everybody plans under uncertainties. I mean, that's just the way things are, and something that brings us pretty well down, and like the 5 or 6% did within a 20-year period, I guess I'd be comfortable with. And if things go awry in that period of time, the commission at the time is going to be the entity that's going to have to deal with that. So,
We've talked as staff, and we know that the liability is large. And you're right, the apples to oranges comparison between West Lynn, for instance, we've got more infrastructure, more aged infrastructure than West Lynn, and more liability than West Lynn. And even though they've been paying a much lower rate for years. West Lynn is not a model. It's an example, and we were gonna talk
It
about
should
that.
never
It's not
be
a model.
I agree.
I also know the pressure behind trying to figure out where to land on a number. But again, we're trying to share with you what we think is the most responsible, and we're trying to show you some numbers based on
Right.
what you
Right.
suggested. We do need some direction to the degree that we can use it to help inform the public with more information. So that's, you guys are stealing all my thunder here, but Alita worked so hard on this presentation.
Yeah.
So I want to go through that
Yeah, go ahead.
some
No,
more.
no,
But
that's right.
I hear what you're saying. I do. So let's see. Some of this information we gave you already. So this is a reminder. We did some surveys through telephone poll survey and online survey. And that information is available on our website. And that's. But the good news is we're starting in a pretty good place. It's kind of good news because people, but the problem with it is people don't realize that we have problems in Oregon City with our water system. So people are definitely. They don't have that understanding that we'd like to have of this particular issue, so it's going to take some effort to get them informed. We also heard that the no amendment option, which is what we think of as the rollback piece of this, is a non-option, and that there was support for the 5 to 8% rate increases. Again, this slide just represents not many people are aware that we've got a problem, and I think it was that was represented in both surveys. This was an interesting slide. You've seen it before, but we had basically 3 levels of informed people. One was the telephone survey, which is in the blue. The other one was the online survey, and we think the online survey folks that use that are the more informed group than the group that you did it. Kathy, good. I'm sure you were. Kathy, were you at the 8% option?
I'm sure Kathy was.
And then
She's not. So.
we also had our water rate work group, which was most informed, and they also led to that 5 to 8% option. So, and I think they landed on the 8%, but they had some caveats to that, as they often do. But again, in generality, they were all supportive of rate increases. That
Could you go
were
back to that
responsible.
slide, please?
Yes.
We could assume that those represented maximums that they would accept. So if you added the 20 and the 17 and the 19 together, that would exceed the 33% under the 8% cap option. So somebody who says they prefer the 5%, you got to keep in mind that you have to accumulate. They probably accumulate with the ones down at the bottom, and you may only get 33% supporting it at the end of the game.
Right.
And so I wanted to make that particular point.
And others have made the point to me, which I agree with. Depending on if we're not united on this, if we don't have your support, and we don't have some of those people who have contributed a great amount of thought and energy to this, but also are falling on the concern of higher rates. If we don't have their buy-in in this, we realize. We're probably not going to be successful.
The phone survey are getting some background information, and we've got the guarantee it wasn't really biased, just telling what the city's situation is. And of course, whatever option we choose, we're responsible for getting the information out to as many people as we can. I understand that. But the point is, there are people that are not going to get that information for one reason or another. And from a practical standpoint, I would say you got the 8% at 33%, and the 5% at 5% at 19. You add those together, you're getting very close to 50%. And so I think the high end would be a very, very, very difficult thing to sell. But I'm not trying to stop the presentation.
Well, I will. No. But one thing I kind of hone in on is how many years it takes us to get caught up. To me, we're kind of in that danger period until we get caught up, because the future is uncertain and we don't know what's coming down the road. And so until we get caught up and can be in an area of just maintenance, I don't feel that we're safe. And maybe that is represented in this survey a little bit, why the support was there for the higher percentages, just to get us in a stable position.
I agree. I think that what we heard out of the survey was people feel pretty strongly about good water service, good fire service, emergency services are important to them, and the thought of that being threatened for multiple main breaks or those kind of problems. That was concerning to many. So when they heard that, that maybe their water service might be threatened based on rates, they were more supportive. And I don't think that was given to them in a real. I probably shouldn't have said threatened, because we didn't present it as threatening or a horror story. We were just presenting unbiased information. So
It could add expense if there were some catastrophic breaks or something because the maintenance had been deferred. It could add expenses if it doesn't get fixed.
a lot.
Right.
Yep.
Right now, what we're doing is patching things, and it takes sometimes days to put one little patch on it. That really, if we were to do a line replacement, it's not like we'd save that little patch for future use, and we'd still have to dig right through that and replace all that. So,
There's one thing, you guys maybe do too good of a job of covering things up. Excuse me. Not covering things up, excuse me. Keeping things under control. Okay?
That's better. Thank you.
Because having moved from the country, there's nothing that brings it more to this. This is really a funny one. More to the surface and more to your attention than a failed septic system.
Yes.
And
Correct.
people don't see those things because you do a good job of keeping it under control.
Or smell them. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
try to not do such a good job
Okay, good.
in the future. And then, so a summary of that polling information was: we need a lot of community education. They definitely want us to fix the problem, and there's all kinds of different understandings of what fixing the problem means. The 8% cap has support, but we realize that's on kind of shaky ground. But we still think it's a responsible thing to pursue. 5% cap also has support. So I said we shouldn't use West Lynn, but we have. we have because it's so recent. I mean, that's
Yes.
the main thing, and because they're right across the river from us, and because these are comparable issues, even though I think our systems are.
We both
not
use the same
comparable.
water.
We both use the same water. So anyway, I think we heard that the City Commission adopted a resolution to go with the 18%
yeah.
as a measure to put before.
Do they do this
voters.
before or after the election?
They just did it. It would have been
They
after.
just did
yeah.
it. Just going after.
Smart.
Yes.
Our election's over too, Your Honor.
Yes,
Not
I know
making
that.
any suggestions.
I know that.
Yeah.
They have, again, 12.5 miles. I forget the number that we looked at, but we have a lot more old pipe than they do. And West Lynn's charter has been limited to 5% rate increases for a long time, which is 2% more than what we have currently.
I was going to say. Yeah.
Although they did the rollback in 1996 because they hadn't issued bond debt. Which is I don't quite understand that, because that was South Fork Water Board's bond, so I'm not sure how that played out. But anyway, they didn't roll it.
They rolled them back.
They rolled theirs back,
Yeah.
and have been living with the 5% rate increases, which haven't kept up with the needs. Again, we're still shooting for that February 6th meeting, where we hope that you will have enough consensus to be able to adopt a resolution and have enough energy to take that to the streets and sell it as something that can win an election in May. And between now and then, we want to do as much as we can to help create that message for you and have public information. Alita gave me a bunch of things that she's got going. You want to? I wrote them down. So we're working on. We want to do a public service video that's a little bit. A lot of people love their videos, and we want to do that. We'll
Put it on YouTube.
Put it on YouTube and our website and anywhere else that it needs to go. We will have short and discrete talking points so that you and any of the community members can use those in the community to help sell the measure. We're going to have more meetings. We continue to go to meetings to put on presentations like this. Usually they're so short we have trouble getting through the content because it's not a simple solution or not a simple message. Leda's working on with our consultant to put together informative posters that will be available around town. We're going to have a newsletter. It'll be a large 11 by 17 double-sided 2 pages, right? A newsletter that'll go out. We'll have a lot of information. We're going to do a utility bill insert, and so
The
there's
pipes.
a lot of that. What's that?
The pipes.
Pipes.
The pipes
The
are
pipes.
calling.
Or the pipes
Pipes.
can be.
We want
Remember
picture of
the pipes?
The pipes.
We wanted to have some before and after samples
Yes.
for each of our commissioners who are trying to
Absolutely.
explain this, because a picture is worth 1,000 words when it comes to
It
that.
totally is. You're
Are you going to do any branding for this?
Branding. You mean like what we've done with our transportation system plan, where we created a logo and that kind of
Kind of
thing?
a logo with maybe a cartoon-type picture, and what I would suggest, because my dogs are very political, that you do little iron-on things that we could do on T-shirts and things that
I
might
need
bring,
to-
for not the dogs, for people.
Yeah, I need to say something, I'm afraid.
Okay, you can't.
Well,
Staff can't.
there's a process.
Staff
Yeah,
can't.
there are boundaries on this that are pretty strict, and so
They
right
can
now
do that.
you haven't decided on a solution. You don't
Okay.
have a ballot measure.
Right.
We're going to be talking about this more at your retreat coming up. So John has the February 6th date on there as that's sort of the end all date when you need to make a decision on the solution. But you will have a chance to talk about this at some length at your retreat. Once that February 6th date comes, actually when they refer it as a ballot measure, then we are not, the staff cannot assist you after that. So there will have to be citizens, commissioners. You're free to do lots of things as commission
Design
members.
paid for by Commissioner Roth.
Yes.
I am not a designer.
Well,
But I'm just wondering if you had something that you were working on as a brand as part of your presentation.
And February 6th is definitely the cutoff. You can't do, but there hasn't been a court decision. But certainly, to the extent the city sort of had a turnkey political campaign that they handed off and created prior to it, I
Right.
think there could be some problems there. So we want to be
Well, they have
careful.
To stick to, the staff has to stick to the facts.
We've been, and that's our intent.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
well, and of course, we made a recommendation to you. We
Right.
still have a responsibility to make recommendations. But after that, we can advocate for our recommendation. But once you make a decision, then we're done with the advocacy role. And I also wanted to mention that I have approached both Commissioner Mumm and Commissioner Roth about the possibility of them co-chairing a committee of citizens and other interested leaders in the community to advocate for whatever the solution ultimately is
Yeah.
for this as a ballot measure, because those kinds of things, neighborhood meetings by just neighbors who are getting together. I mean, there are all kinds of ways to advocate for that, and can raise money and put articles in the newspaper and write letters to the editor and all the things that people typically do when they're trying to get elected to a seat or when they're trying to pass a school levy or one of those things. So those are going to be the tools that they use.
When we put forward the annexation to Fire District 1, it was a door-to-door campaign.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that's what you're dealing with here.
That's what we're
It's
going to be
retail
dealing
politics.
with here, too.
Retail.
Same with the school bond.
I think
Yeah.
we're going to have to
Yep.
do like a PAC
a lot.
and get some money and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Like an army of 100, 150. I mean,
Yeah.
many more people you can get. You guys know more about politics
Yeah.
than I do. So,
And between now and then, we want to reach out, and if there's groups that you know and feel like we should be connecting with, and if we want to have a in-house meeting or anything like that, that's when I say in-house, in somebody's house kind of a meeting, we're willing to do something like that. So just let us know, especially if they're a group that has some influence that maybe would be a tough crowd, but hopefully we could still kind of convince them that we're
Absolutely.
trying to do something good here. So we have two ballot measures for your consideration. Bill, I know you put the most work into these. We didn't ask you to talk through these, but would you like to talk through these?
Yeah, these are sample, they're drafts, and it depends obviously what the commission decides to do. And there's a little formatting. The typically you see that the bottom two paragraphs should be pushed over to the side. It's part of the summary, and it looks kind of like it isn't. But the first one was to eliminate the rollback entirely and keep some level of percentage increase, and that percentage increase is obviously going to depend on what the commission wants to do. And so, hopefully it should be fairly straightforward, amending the Oregon City Charter limitation on water rates, and then asking the question, and then a straightforward summary. Here's the initiative that was passed in 1996. Part of it went into effect, part of it didn't. This amendment would eliminate the part that never went into effect, but amend the part that does.
Bill, would it be, is it permissible, in your view, to have any kind of explanation there about the 3%, the rate keeping up with the capital needs? Is there a factual basis to say that, or would that be considered too?
I think so, and it'd have to go, and obviously you'd have to wordsmith it, but to say the city's capital costs have increased at X amount, a straightforward factual
Sort of the
statement.
unfunded liability.
Yeah,
So would that be
it's-
like the explanation statement? Is that what you're talking about?
We could do it in an explanatory statement as well, that the commission, we haven't drafted that, and that may be an even better place to really put in the here's why we,
Yeah.
the commission, are sending this to you, the
Right.
voters.
Right.
And so first we have to get the ordinance to have an explanatory statement, and then we can draft an explanatory statement.
Right. And I think, trying to think, we did adopt the ordinance that allows us to do that. So,
Yes, we
We did.
Yes, we
Okay.
did.
Okay, good.
yeah, we're in good shape there. But the other part of this is there are significant word number limitations in the caption, the question, and the summary.
One of the concerns I have too is that people tend to assume that whatever number is in there, that government will always use the highest number and spend every penny. And where we all know that our objective here is to have the higher number at the beginning of the problem, and when it's under control, to cut that number back. So I think it'll be important to try to write that in a way that reveals that it's a maximum, or I know you've said there, increase the limitation, but I'm hoping that people understand it's a no more than proposition, and that not every single year forever after they're going to get a 8% hit.
Right.
Right, and that's important.
Yeah, and that's
So, John, can you email this PowerPoint to us?
We can.
Okay.
Um,
Because it wasn't
gonna-
in our packet, was it?
No, this
Okay.
is, and we'll post this on our website as well.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry, Bill.
Do you want us to email it to, is everybody
Sure.
looking
Yeah, I think
interested in
that'd
it?
be great.
Okay.
And all I was going to say is, in response to the manager's comments, that this is a draft, and it's the first take at it, so we can
Yeah.
work on it.
Yeah, thank you.
That's why sample is capitalized.
We have the second measure as well. Did you want to talk through that one? This one's
Sure.
the one
The
that-
second one is basically eliminates the section entirely. It says no limitation. And this was something that John had sent to me and suggested. One of the possibilities have been talked about is the commission adopt an ordinance that says water rates shall be capped, increases in water rates shall be capped at a certain point. And so the summary specifically notes that the city has now adopted an ordinance that limits water rate increases no more than X percent per year. And the result would be this would be out of the charter, but there'd still be some limitation in the city ordinances, if that's a course the commission wants to take as well.
And I'd like to
The
say
idea-
something about this, because I sent out an email
Yes.
to you folks after this occurred to me that this might be one of the legislative ways, because at one of our meetings, I think Commissioner Ross said, I'm uncomfortable with numbers in a charter. And generally, from a drafting standpoint, that's a very good concern to have, because I think we can see both in our city and others that when you plug numbers in there and then the reality doesn't happen to match the number, then you've got issues. So I was trying to think of a way to balance that concern with, I believe it was the mayor that had a concern about not having some sort of limitation, and that people might not be comfortable having no limit. And so I'm sort of an advocate for you adopting an ordinance at whatever number you end up being comfortable with, because whether it's in the charter or not, I think it shows that the commission is trying to deal with the problem.
Wasn't our plan to bring that earlier?
Removing this thing from the charter altogether. I think that was the issue.
Bring the ordinance early.
Right.
I just want a clarification on this. We could do the ordinance, but the ordinance wouldn't be effective until the ballot measure passes. Is that the case? That is, we can't write an ordinance that counter.
The charter would take precedence over any ordinance. You
That's
can't
right.
adopt an
So
ordinance
we-
that's in
we-
conflict.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you have an ordinance that says water rates can increase no more than 6%, and if you have a charter provision that says water rates can increase no more than 3%, they're not necessarily in conflict, because you can have an increase of anywhere from 0 to 3 and comply
Yeah.
with
No,
both.
I understand that. I
So
understand that.
you
But the
can-
point is, the 6% would not come
It
into
wouldn't be
effect
effective.
unless the charter amendment is.
Right, it would serve no
then-
point.
Well,
unless
it'd
the
still be
charter-
less than 6, so it would be in effect in a sense, but it wouldn't be because of that, because of the charter limitation.
The point is, an ordinance can't
trump the charter.
Can't trump the charter. And
Right.
that's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah.
But if the measure
Passes.
then passes,
Then it takes it out of the charter.
yeah, and you've got some assurance to your voting public that we've set a limit. We've just set a higher limit through an ordinance, right?
But this is the issue I have with that, is I think right now our voting public is not trusting of government, and I would hate to pull this out of the charter and ask them to pay more. And I don't know, I just see it as more of a comfort thing. They kind of wrap themselves around, this is in the charter. I don't know.
And you're right, because nothing, once that's done, nothing precludes another ordinance from being
Yes.
written
Right.
at a later date with a
Yes.
higher percentage.
Yes.
There's a process, but
Yeah.
any council can change an
Yes.
ordinance.
So I like it in the charter, and I think our voting public would appreciate that, but I could be wrong. Maybe they'll all email me tomorrow and say you're wrong.
You know, the interesting thing is, whether it's an ordinance or a charter or both or neither, you still have to pick a number. Somewhere.
Yes, and
Yeah.
Somewhere
I'm
you
good
have to
with
pick
that-
a
number.
I'm good with that
But the way-
number. I mean, I'm happy to put forth a number, but I personally would like to see it left in the charter.
So and again, it's a work session, I'm not sure, but how this plays out, but, I mean, we've suggested the repeal of Section 58 a couple times, and a couple times other than last time we brought it, there was this concern about a number in the charter. So I think the direction I'm hearing tonight is that this kind of a ballot measure wouldn't be supported by this commission.
Not by me, but I don't know how.
I don't know.
I think what we
concern
need,
is-
I've been
the
very
cons-
vocal.
You're not-
I think we've all been vocal about the concern that something that was voted into the charter
Yes.
be removed.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, where the concern is.
so do you want to
So
remove it
keep-
and
I
replace
think,
it with
you know,
another
keeping
cap,
it in
or do you
there
want to?
And modifying it is a lot different than completely repealing it or
I
taking it
agree.
away.
Yeah.
So we're more or less in consensus that we want to replace the language in the charter, not
I think
remove
that's-
the
And
language
not
in the charter.
remove it
That's a
from the
lot has a
charter.
Okay.
lot more likely chance of
So
being
just
I
supported.
agree.
toward the consensus, then, I want to confirm with Commissioner Roth, can you live with a number in the charter?
I can live with the number.
Okay. So we've gotten somewhere tonight, even though we still don't have the magic number.
He laughed.
And, you know, and I have to tell you,
Apologize.
We have.
Well, I don't
We
think that's
actually
any
have,
different
and
from what we've said at the last couple meetings. I
Yeah.
don't think that's a different.
well,
I think we're
been an
voicing
issue.
it more clearly.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe,
At
but
this-
And you've had more time to
think-
think about it.
Yeah.
And that's important because,
We're looking at all possibilities.
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's good.
You mean all possibilities of a number? No.
no.
I'm not looking at all
Well, you
possibilities.
know, okay, this is my deal. Okay, so we're at 3% right now. So right now we are in a recession, supposedly. I don't know, but the money is just not there for the voting public. If you want to, you know, it just is not there. So if you move it up to 5%, that gives you 2 more percentage points, correct, than what you have right now in today's market. So if I bumped it to 6, that gives you double the money you have right now, which is not the 8% that you want. But I think the 6 is where I could sell myself to the voting public. I don't know what anybody else says, but
I can
This is
sell
great.
it.
This is great discussion.
Yeah, I
So
think that's exactly right.
It's helpful.
I mean,
And,
that's,
I think Kathy
actually-
said you can sell
You
eight.
better restate that.
You can sell six. Do I hear a seven? I'm just.
I hear 10?
I didn't go to auction
look at how many years that it's caught up.
He's going to go
I
in
know.
here.
Caught up. I still
Yes.
look at that because the risk is not lowered until we're caught up.
Right.
Because if something catastrophic happens, it's going to be much more time
Right.
that'll
No,
take us
I
to get
totally,
caught up.
I totally understand
And I
that.
think if that's, I think that can be communicated. And I think that makes, sense with people.
We're going to go
So
back to.
I'm more for the 7 or 8.
So you have
Kathy
some
said
time
you
to
can
talk
sell
amongst
eight.
yourselves before we talk about this again at the retreat.
Okay, thank
It
you.
looks like you've really
We're
done a
moving
lot
closer.
of good work because we know we need a
Amazing.
number. We know we can live with some number. We know that number's going to be between 5 and 8.
Yes.
And we even know that some of you like 7 or 8 and some of you like 6.
Yeah.
So that's
It could change, though.
Here we
It could
are,
change, like,
this
change
right-wing
tomorrow.
Republican and this left-wing Democrat agreeing on the same number.
Yes, yes.
that's perfect co-chairing of the committee.
I love it.
Oregon City
At
can
least
solve
we're
problems.
agreeing
Don't need to.
on the whole concept
Yeah.
of, what
That
we need to do.
yeah, we need to have a
are
fixed number.
Totally agreeing. We're just off 1% or 2 by the number.
You know, Mayor, can I say something about what my observation is here? That Oregon City, sometimes we, when it comes to what seemingly are the tiniest problems that almost are distinctions without a difference. And I don't want to belittle the CIC debacle, with the election, but, these small things that
Well,
we
we
get
have
wrapped
to do-
around
yeah.
that divide us almost like really bitterly.
Yep.
And then you get some giant freight train problem like this that
Yeah.
could just
Yeah.
devastate the quality of life in the city, and it's almost like there's no politics.
Yeah.
Suddenly, we
Well,
just
there-
Right, exactly.
we're
there
just
should not be.
people, a bunch of people that love Oregon City, and
Yeah.
by gosh, we're going to roll up our sleeves and fix this thing.
And do it.
Right.
And I'm just so proud of Oregon City for that part of it, because there's some cities that simply can't ever take a time out on politics.
You don't know, we haven't got to February,
I know.
whatever it is.
I'm trained to be somebody's got to be an optimist.
You don't know where we're
We have
headed.
plenty of time to argue.
You don't know where this train is headed.
Okay, we'll celebrate later.
Into a quiet zone.
Well, I like to control our presentations.
I
but,
love it. Try and control.
Now it's time for discussion and direction. How about
Good job,
that?
Don. I love it.
I think we got what we needed there. So thank you for your time.
Well, now
We're
that,
ahead of schedule.
now that Mr. Kyle's come in, no.
And I would like to thank Alita for putting
Yes,
this together
thank
and
you.
all the work that she's
Yeah,
doing.
lots of work.
'Cause she's really leading this all the energy
She's
and
the
effort that goes into that.
silent leader.
No, she's not
Well,
silent. I've heard
she
her.
wasn't the other day when John wasn't here.
Yes.
Comment.
Yeah.
Citizen comment.
Any citizen comment? Yeah, come on,
Thank you,
come on,
guys.
Thank you very much.
Once again, I appreciate the fact that you're allowing citizens to participate
Absolutely.
in answer to your goal 5. I happen to have attended the citizen-based water rate advisory work session or work group session that was held on October 30th. And one of the things that transpired there that I'm not sure whether you ever had access to in terms of information, the representative from Financial Consulting Solutions came prepared with a flip chart which had 4 items listed in terms of the various choices you're attempting to make here. And due to previous work that work group had done, asked the members of that work group to individually go across the podium and rank 1 through 4 what order they felt they preferred. And there was a lot of deliberation, a lot of consideration by each of those citizens in the responses that they gave, and they explained the responses of why they ranked one thing versus another. Until it got to the very last individual, who was Tim Powell. And Tim was a little hesitant. He very politely said, well, you know, my number one choice isn't even on your flip chart. And he went on to talk about how he felt that the citizens would buy in to a rate increase more easily if they were presented with an opportunity to approve a general obligation bond. And immediately upon conclusion of his delivery, Craig Danielson, who had been among the first people to give his views, said, I totally agree. That would be my first choice. And with that, you could see heads nodding across the entire spectrum of the podium. Why that information was never shared with you, I do not know. Was it shared with you?
In fact, we talked about it at the last meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was at the last meeting, and I did not hear it brought
Well,
up.
It was there.
it was there very subtly. I thought we would talk more about it, but it didn't.
I would suggest that between now and the retreat, you get an opportunity to converse with Tim and with Craig, and you'll get their views. I can't express in their behalf how strongly they felt about it, but they had, I think, the foresight to understand this is going to be a difficult sell, no matter what you do. And I have no dog in this fight, okay? I just think that, you know, if we're asking citizens to be involved and come up with solutions, I know that had I been on that committee and my views, if I were Tim Powell, weren't shared properly, or at least, you know, brought up for consideration, I would probably be reluctant to serve in any capacity in the city again. That's just my personal feeling.
Yes, go ahead.
So I just want to reemphasize that we did hear that pretty loud and clear from the Water Rate Advisory Group, and it was presented in a way that they didn't know the answer, nor did the consultant that was participating know the answer, but we committed, like all the other scenarios that we've done, to build a scenario based on borrowing that funding early, that, you know, the funding that was needed to cover our liability, and paying that over time, or putting together a scenario that would repay that in a reasonable amount of time. And so that scenario was presented at the November work session. Mm-hmm. It was a one slide where we showed the scenario. We didn't go through all the rate increase pieces. It was clear to John Ghilarducci from FCS Group that was not a scenario that would in any way work. So we presented it. I don't think Tim might have been there for that meeting as well, but Tim and I have talked.
He wasn't.
And
there was only a few members from, because when we had our individual meetings prior, we talked about this concept, and I was very concerned. Well, I was vocal that we get as many of those members from that committee to come to that meeting, and there was a lot of other things that were discussed. So I don't think we didn't go into that answer in great depth, partly because I think those members weren't there, because we had known the answer, but I don't think the answer had been communicated to that group, and I think that needs to be done if it hasn't already. Why that is not an option we've really discussed beyond that, because I think we were all pretty comfortable with the answer we received as individual commissioners about why that wouldn't be the best scenario.
The thing I'd also mention is we would still have to put forward a charter amendment to prevent the rollback.
Yeah.
And what I wouldn't want to do is have both of those things on the same ballot. I think it'd be very, very confusing. Other thing I have, I guess, in general obligation bonds is if we're ever to do that, and I don't know how you do it unless you talk to everybody ahead of time, is not to put in a general obligation bond if we have another entity, another district or something also doing it at the same time.
Right.
Because that can oftentimes kill both of them.
Yes.
That's why.
And I don't know if the college is having any plans. I know plans at one point.
Well, we've
No,
already
we
gone.
do
That was
now.
one of my specific questions, and we got the answer that
We got
no one's
nothing
doing
else.
it.
Nobody's doing it. That's right. That answer
So-
did come through. I guess, but we'd still have to deal with a charter amendment in any case.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that
And
would be,
so I'd hate to put two measures at the same time on the ballot.
And it would be somewhat unusual to use a capital, well, general obligation bonds are usually for capital structures. To
Right.
use those for things that are operational maintenance
Yes.
on it, you could use it to fix the system and upgrade it all
Well,
at
that's-
once.
that's what
I
he's
think that
talking
might have been
about.
what they were
Exactly.
thinking.
Right.
Fix it in one fell swoop, and that could still be done with the rates, but yeah, that's one of them. And then, of course, after that, after you get it installed,
You still have to
you still have to
maintain.
maintain it, and that may be hard to do at 3%.
But that's an issue in terms of the other things he
Yeah.
was suggesting, going from such and such back down to 3%. Because
Yes.
the pipes will, no matter what, the pipes will keep going aging. So,
Yes, that's true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hearing no other things on this
City
topic, are we down to city manager?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we've talked about everything that was under my city manager's report, including the co-chair, the idea of two of our commissioners volunteering. Thank you for volunteering for that, by the way. I'm going to be taking my parents on a vacation, December 13th to the 24th.
nice.
Mr. Conkle is going to stand in my absence, and
Lucky him.
sit in, stand in, be there.
Forward to the 19th.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, is that the same weekend that the world's supposed to end?
Yes. No.
Oh, no.
Oh, no! 21st, right?
Well,
You said the 19th?
Well, if it ends, I'm
When
going
are
to
you
be.
be back?
It'll be ending for me somewhere warm.
Are you ready for that? Are you ready for Armageddon?
No,
Police chief and I have a meeting scheduled for the 20th.
the Mayan calendar ended on that. They didn't say it was when the world was going to end.
You could probably declare an extension, Mayor, if you will.
With that, we are adjourning to an executive session dealing with pursuant to ORS 192-6602E to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions.
Yes.
Bracket.